Hello, lovely. Today, in this video, we're gonna give you sample answers for Accommodation, IELTS Speaking Part 1. I'm Maria.
And my name is Rory, and we are the hosts of the IELTS Speaking for Success podcast, the podcast that aims to help you improve your speaking skills as well as your listening skills along the way.
Yes, in this video podcast, do we call it a video cast? Rory, what do you call?
A
video
vidcast.
And a vidcast. Ooh,
Vidcast.
Nice.
That sounds futuristic.
Right, so now we're going to be discussing accommodation. So why accommodation? Because this is a very common IELTS Speaking Part 1 topic. And as we know, and if you don't know, now you know, the examiner usually chooses to ask you questions about accommodation, about work or studies, sometimes your hometown or your country, but usually they choose from accommodation or work or studies. Rory?
Yes.
Good. Yes, Rory agrees. So,
No,
while
that's
watching...
That's all I do. I just sit and agree and go, yes, that's it.
Right, so I give you quality and Rory goes, yes. Right,
Yes,
okay, good.
that's
so,
what I do.
Dear listener or viewer, so please, hello, you, while watching and listening to Rory's super answers, could you also think about your answers? So what would you like to tell us? And could you write in the comments, all right?
That's quite important, isn't it? Because, of course, my answers are my own. They're about me and some of the grammar and vocabulary you can use, but it's important you try and apply it to your context as well. So why not try using them? And the other thing is people can learn from what you've written as well. So we've got a bit of a hive mind going on here. Oh, it sounds creepy, but it is also very cool.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
It's
now,
okay.
Shall we begin? Are you ready, Rory?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's talk about accommodation. Do you live in a house or a flat?
Oh, I've been living in a 3-bedroom house for the last year now.
How long have you lived there?
Like I said, for the last year. About 9 months to be exact.
And what do you like the most about living there?
I love the local area. It's next to the beach, but if you walk for 1 or 2 hours, then you can be up in the hills as well. So there's a great diversity there in terms of ways to stretch your legs. It's also got, 2 pretty big gardens, which comes in handy for parties.
What's your favorite room?
Well, I like my office. It's got all my bits and pieces for work, and it's quite isolated from the rest of the building, so there are fewer distractions.
Can you describe the view from the window?
From the office, it's not exactly a panorama. I'm just looking now. I can see our neighbour's walls and part of the decking outside, but that's due to the angle I usually see things from. We have a rather spectacular view from the living room window of the beach and the riverbanks, so that's the one I'd recommend.
Do you plan to live there in the future?
I'd certainly like to, but that's all contingent on whether I get placed in a school nearby. If not, then I'll probably be living further away for the foreseeable future. But it will always be there, and I can come back, so I'm hardly missing out.
And can you tell me about the house you lived in when you were a child?
I just did. But this is the house that I lived in when I was a child. Obviously, it feels much smaller now, and some parts have been renovated, but overall, it's the same building that it always was.
Thank you, Rory, for your lovely answers.
That's okay. Shall we talk about the grammar and vocabulary?
Right, Rory, so tell us about a 3-bedroom house. Why not a 3-bedrooms house?
Well, the S there shows that there's a number, but you've already talked about we already talked about the number when we had the number 3, so we don't need it here. Also, it's turning the word bedroom into an adjective as well, so it's like 3-bedroom to describe the kind of house.
That's my boy. This is an educated native speaker. Hey, 3-bedroom house.
I know about my language, unlike most native speakers.
I live in a 3-bedroom house, or you can say I live in a 3-room flat. So a 3-room flat, right? And also Rory has used the present perfect continuous. I've been living in a 3-bedroom flat. Or you can say like I live in a house, I live in a flat, I've been living there for all my life, or I've been living there for 3 years. Yeah.
I suppose the temptation to say, when someone asks, do you live in a house or a flat, is just to say, a flat, or I live in a house. And that's not very well, it's not terribly complex, is it? So if we put in present perfect continuous, then it's super, well, what? Complex. Not super complex, but it is more complex than present simple.
Okay, and then about what do you like most about it? You told us about your local area. So local area, the area around the house, and you said something about diversity.
Yes. So, just like a great diversity. And then I went on to describe what kind of diversity. So I said in terms of ways to stretch your legs, which is another expression that we should focus on. Ways to stretch your legs just means, well, ways of getting outside and walking around. It's better than saying, though, there's great diversity in terms of ways to get outside and walk around. Most people say to stretch your legs, or to stretch my legs or their legs.
And you said that big gardens that you have nearby come in handy for parties. Rory is always thinking about the parties.
Yes, I had a few going away parties. And when I say a few, I mean, how many did I have?
21?
So 300. Why
yeah,
not?
so if something comes in handy, so gardens comes in handy for parties, the sea comes in handy for swimming.
Things come in handy just means that things are useful in certain circumstances. So having big gardens, it comes in handy for having parties, for example. Having the sea nearby comes in handy for swimming. Having shops nearby comes in handy when you need something very quickly. So all of these things are useful, but instead of saying useful, it comes in handy.
Yes. What about our podcast and videos in terms of IELTS preparation?
Only our podcast and only our videos come in handy.
Yes, true. Right. What's your favorite room? Dear listener, be ready to speak about your favorite room, and you can lie if you don't have it. And Rory said that it's my office. So he has an office in his house.
I do. I appreciate, though, that not everybody has an office in their house, but you could pretty much say the same thing about your bedroom if you wanted to. Like, I like my bedroom. It's got everything I need, or all my bits and pieces for work, and it's quite isolated from the rest of the building, so there are fewer distractions. You could use that to describe any room in your house.
Yeah. What about the kitchen? Some people enjoy the kitchen because it has food, it has their favorite fridge.
Yeah, so you could say, like, it's got all of my bits and pieces for cooking or for storing food.
Yummy, yummy. Yeah, okay. And also the view from the windows. So Rory said that, it's not exactly a panorama.
Panorama. It's like it's a very long picture. It covers a wide area. So you can have a panorama showing like a mountain, like the full extent of the mountain and the countryside around it, for example. Most people have a panorama, a panorama option on their phones as well. And I think it's called Panorama in just about every single language, isn't it?
So can I say that my windows, from my flat, my windows overlook the forest?
Yes, especially if you live in a block of flats, because you're quite high up, and overlooking is to do with being high up. My house only has one floor or one story. So that means that the only thing it overlooks is the ground, which is not very, it's not like a view from high up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if you live in a flat, you can say I live in a block of flats and my windows overlook the children's playground, or my windows overlook the forest or the park, so my windows overlook. Or I can see a forest or I can see children's playground from my windows. Yeah. Rory sees his neighbor's walls. Maybe you see your neighbor's walls, or you can see another building, another block of flats, right? Or some, skyscraper, perhaps. And Rory said that we have a rather spectacular view from the living room window. Yeah? So we have a spectacular view from the kitchen window, from the living room window of the beach, right? We have a view of something, right?
Yes.
Really? So you see the sea? You see
the
sea?
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's right outside, the front garden. I was going to say, though, if we back up a bit, we were talking about vocabulary and grammar, but we should also talk about pronunciation. So The question before was, what's your favorite room and why? And then it said, can you describe the view from your windows? So for me, I was able to connect that just by saying from the office, like with a questioning intonation. And that's quite useful as well, because that's something that you get tested on when you have your, when you have your test.
And about the future. So the examiner is likely to ask you about the future. Where would you like to live in the future? And Rory said, it's all contingent on whether, contingent.
That's just because I got bored of saying it depends on. If something depends on something, and if something is contingent on something, then they're essentially the same thing. Not exactly the same, but it's just another way of saying it depends on something.
Yeah, you can say it's contingent on my future plans, it's contingent on the money, it's contingent on whether I do that or do that, right? And then an if sentence. If not, then I'll be living there. So I'll be living. Future continuous. I'll be living. Yeah.
You're welcome.
And you can also use the second conditional. In the future, if I had, if I had more money, I'd move to the house, right? Or if I had more money, I'd go there. What about renovated?
Renovated just means improved or enhanced somehow. So most people renovate their houses, perhaps when they buy them at first. So they maybe take out some old parts and then they add some new parts in, and that's a kind of renovation. Or they have a new kitchen put in.
Right. So you can say, I'd like to have a new kitchen put in, right? If I don't renovate my flat myself, I hire certain people. So I say, I'd like to have my flat renovated. Yeah, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or for example, the examiner may ask you, what would you like to change in your flat? And you say, I'd like to have my kitchen renovated. Right?
Yeah, or I was just thinking about a phrasal verb there. You could say, I'd like to have my kitchen fixed up. So that's more to do with getting it repaired. But still, it's a nice phrasal verb to throw in.
Yeah, I'd like to have my kitchen fixed up. So I'd like to have my bedroom fixed up, to have something done, right? I'd like to have my walls painted. Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure you do squeeze in the structure. The structure is nice. And phrasal verb course. We have a course on phrasal verbs. Yes, Rory?
It's successwithielts.com/pod courses. And the reason I know that is because I had to say it 350 times when we recorded the course.
Okay, so to wrap up, accommodation is really common, and usually the examiner the examiner chooses to ask you questions either about accommodation or work or studies as the very first topic in speaking part 1. So yeah. Rory, what's your message to the world?
I hope it will be easy to move in the new vocabulary. There we go. And now we can all die of secondhand embarrassment.
Dear listener, could you please let us know about your accommodation, your house or a flat? Where do you live in? And tell us what you like about it. And you can use some of the phrases, grammar structures that Super Rory has used talking about his super house, his nest, Rory's nest. Thank you very much for listening.
See you next time.
Bye.